Hey everyone, I'm Julia Maguire from the Capital Network. Welcome to the OncoSil Medical Limited investor webinar. The webinar is expected to run for approximately 45 minutes. Today we have with us Nigel Lange, who is the CEO and Managing Director. He will walk you through the slide pack. Everyone will be on a forced mute, and at the end I'll read out your questions from the chat box. Over to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Julia. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nigel Lange. I'm the CEO and Managing Director of OncoSil Medical, and it gives me great pleasure to update you on some of our recent achievements. Standard disclaimer. So, what has OncoSil been up to in the past several months? So, I'll give you a brief executive summary. Indeed, we are commercializing a targeted radiotherapy for pancreatic cancer. We're now available for sale in over 34 countries. Our commercial ramp up is expected in fiscal year 2026. We've got increasing market expansion via combining new methods of delivery for the technology, as well as the addition of a new chemotherapy regimen. So this allows us to accelerate market penetration, particularly since we also have a shortened sales cycle as a result of having received MDR approval in the EU. We believe what we have is a platform technology that can be leveraged into other cancer indications, such as bile duct cancer, liver, and perhaps even glioblastoma. The board and management of the team has a lot of experience in the commercialization of radiotherapy, so we're very pleased with the current complement in terms of the senior leadership team and the board. So the market is valued for pancreatic cancer at about $4.2 billion US dollars. That is the global market, and there is really no competition. OncoSil has been granted breakthrough designation in several jurisdictions and with extensive patent coverage across all geographies. The large global pancreatic cancer population consists of about 510,000 patients per annum, but we target locally unresectable population, which accounts for about 153,000 or 30% of the 510,000. However, the market is expected to increase by 37% by the year 2035. What we've seen in pancreatic cancer is negligible survival improvement, less than 12% survival rates at 5 years, and 8.5-month median overall survival. So the prognosis for these patients is very poor indeed. I'm also happy to report here that the first ever comparative analysis published in May 2025 indicates significant benefit in combination with chemotherapy. So what does this mean? Overall survival benefit is greater than 7 months. So an improvement of 7 months, so 20 months versus 12.3 months with chemotherapy alone. We've managed to more than double the surgical resection rate, 28% in OncoSil plus chemotherapy versus 12.1% in chemotherapy alone. We've also more than doubled patients downstaged to surgical resection, 31.4% with the OncoSil device plus chemotherapy versus 13.6% in chemotherapy alone. There's a second comparative analysis that was presented in May 2025, confirms the superiority of OncoSil plus chemotherapy versus chemotherapy and stereotactic body radiotherapy, or external beam radiation, if you will. It's also important to note that we've got attractive unit economics. The indicative sales price per device is approximately 24,000 US dollars. Market expansion, or margin expansion rather, is expected to increase from 50% to 65% once we come online with our Australian facility. And we have a target of achieving a greater than 75% gross profit margin at scale. We were embarking on cost out initiatives to drive lower fixed cost base. So that's a target of 20%. And we have significant opportunity here for operating leverage over the medium term. There is negligible CapEx required in the foreseeable future. What are the significant recent achievements? Well, I think important to point out that both studies that we're running, one was an OncoSil sponsored study called TRIP FFX, which seeks to expand the addition of FOLFIRINOX chemotherapy to the label. That study has been completed. And the investigator-led study, which we believe is potentially groundbreaking for us, called OncoSil, run out of the University of Amsterdam to administer the treatment percutaneously, was also completed just recently. The company's also received MDR approval and UKCA certificate, which includes the removal of all existing post-market restrictions in Europe and the UK, reducing it serves to shorten the sales cycle and reduce the friction that it's caused in terms of bringing up new institutions. So moving on, the company is catalyst rich in 2025 and 2026 at commercial ramp up in existing markets, including Greece, Israel, Italy, Spain, and Turkey. So we're accelerating market activities via expanded market access and geographical opportunities to include new markets such as Argentina, Brazil, South Korea, Southeast Asia, Switzerland. We're also embarking on the first commercial production from the Sydney manufacturing facility. We anticipate this to be perhaps late Q4 2025. The OncoSil device will also be commercially available to interventional radiologists, perhaps in late Q4 2025. TGA approval is also expected in Q4 of this year. That has been filed and is currently under review. We will also launch in the Gulf regions in the first half of 2026. Most recently, as most of you are aware, we completed an equity raising, which comprised two tranches, an institutional placement of $6.7 million and a share purchase plan of $2 million, which, by the way, happened to be oversubscribed by $2.4 million. And we also completed a share consolidation prior to the equity raise at 1 for 400. So pancreatic cancer, it's important to point out that the prognosis has really remained unchanged for the past 40 years. If we look at this slide and we see all of the advances here in prostate cancer, breast cancer, bowel cancer, lung cancer, we see significant improvements that have made in these cancers. However, when we look down here in the yellow box, not much has moved. The dial has just barely moved. What does that mean for us as a company? So survival rates we know are very poor, 8.5 months overall, median overall survival. Less than 12% of patients reach 5-year survival. It's got the lowest survival rate of any other cancer. The number of cases and deaths, both estimated to increase by 40% before 2035. What does that mean? It means really that new therapeutic options are urgently required. What does pancreatic cancer, just a little brief description here of what pancreatic cancer looks like and how it's staged at diagnosis. So if one looks to the left of the slide, patients that can go on to resection are about 15% at the time of diagnosis. That offers patients the best median overall survival at 19 months. However, if we look to the far right, we look at patients with metastatic disease, patients presenting and being diagnosed, 55% of them already have metastases. And that is a generally very poor prognosis. Median overall survival is less than 6 months with gemcitabine, about 8.5 months with gemcitabine chemotherapy plus nab-paclitaxel, and 11.1 months overall survival with FOLFIRINOX chemotherapy. 30% of locally advanced pancreatic cancer patients show metastatic progression within 3 to 6 months. So it's a very fast-moving disease. In the middle of the slide, locally advanced, that's the space that we currently occupy. So the choices here are palliative therapies, chemotherapy, plus or minus radiation, with a median overall survival of 13 months. So that is our current indication. It's locally advanced, unresectable pancreatic cancer, and that represents 30% of all pancreatic cancer. What is the OncoSil device? For those of you that have not seen this slide before, I'll explain a little bit about what it is, and for some of you, this will be a bit of a refresher. So the device is intended for the treatment of locally advanced, unresectable pancreatic cancer in combination with gemcitabine-based chemotherapy. And we know that we just completed the TRIP study, so that hopefully will get on our label shortly. The device is delivered endoscopically under ultrasound guidance by an endoscopist or a gastroenterologist. It is a single-use device. 98% of all the radiation is delivered over 81 days following the injection, and this causes damage to cancer cell DNA, killing malignant cancer cells with no concurrent damage to surrounding tissues. Generally, it only requires one supervised procedure, given the familiarity and simplicity with standard everyday biopsy procedures. So what are we looking at in the future? We're also looking at now adding to the label percutaneous application, which will be done under CT guidance by interventional radiology. We believe that this is potentially transformational to our business, and it is anticipated to significantly accelerate market penetration. OncoSil study is now complete. We expect top-line readout perhaps by the end of Q3. And the reason for this is that we need to follow the last patient into the study for 12 weeks. So we're targeting Q4 2020, calendar year 2025, to hopefully get this approved by a regulatory body and put it in the hands of interventional radiology, in addition to continuing to work with endoscopists to administer the treatment. The product is now for sale, as I mentioned, in 34 countries. Training has commenced when we look at the blue numbers here. So we have commenced training in a number of hospitals. Training is where we have the orange dot. Training is completed, and those hospitals are ready to start. and green represents the current sites using the OncoSil device. So what are we looking at here in terms of commercial market expansion? So currently, the device remains at early stage of commercialization in existing geographies with approximately a valuation of US $651 million market size. We're looking at new geographies, including the Nordic region and Egypt recently added. So therefore, we've gone from 588 million up to 651 million, expanding to US $1.1 billion addressable market over the next 18 to 24 months. So if we look at other markets, near-term markets that we have an interest in, such as South Korea, France, Brazil, Argentina, etc., they comprise $529 million, and existing priority markets are $651 million. So that market value is about $1.1 billion. And market penetration is expected to now accelerate over the near term, and this will be driven largely by percutaneous delivery using interventional radiology to administer. In addition to the label expansion, adding FOLFIRINOX chemotherapy to the combination with the OncoSil device. So in terms of accelerating the commercialization, we've got compelling cost-benefit proposition with no direct competition. As mentioned before, unit economics are attractive. We're selling this for about 22,000 euros or 24,000 US dollars. And at scale, with the new facility coming online, we are anticipating, or expecting rather, greater than 75% device gross margin. We have no direct competition. We've been granted breakthrough designation, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, and we are the only commercially available or in development targeted radiotherapy for locally advanced pancreatic cancer. It's a capital light operating model. There's concentrated industry structure with high volumes undertaken at centers of excellence. There's a high return on capital because we have a relatively small sales force that we can run with for the foreseeable future, meaning the next 2 years. There's high operating leverage anticipated through economies of scale in the long term. So commercial scale manufacturing capability, we've got end-to-end manufacturing capabilities. Logistics are already in place and able to meet commercial demand quantity. The second facility in Macquarie Park, just out of Sydney, is expected to be accretive to gross margin and producing the first commercial doses, hopefully by the end of this calendar year. So there are multiple high-value initiatives to broaden market access and accelerate commercialization. So there's the additional method of delivery, as mentioned before, putting this in the hands of interventional radiology. The label expansion to include the combination of additional chemotherapy, which is FOLFIRINOX, and that happens to be the most widely used backbone chemotherapy in this patient population in Europe. And then, of course, as mentioned before, expansion into new markets. So what are we doing in terms of enhancing market access? So on the top of the slide are activities that are currently underway. So that's bile duct cancer. This is seeking the humanitarian device exemption, or HDE. Our discussions with the US FDA are ongoing and remain constructive. In terms of commercial impact, it's a small addressable market. However, a supportive pathway to US market entry for locally advanced pancreatic cancer. So just to describe this is known as bile duct cancer or distal cholangiocarcinoma. This would be approved by the US FDA under the humanitarian device exemption. Also ongoing is the GBA trial. So there are 120 German hospitals now that are able to negotiate reimbursement for the OncoSil device under the funding program NUB, currently awaiting confirmation from the German public health agencies, the Federal Joint Committee, GBA. The GBA approved to move forward with a fully funded study in October 2024. The GBA are now into a second round for a contract research organization to run the study, develop a protocol synopsis along with a trial design. So this is now into the second round, and that is to be submitted by the CROs that have been chosen by the middle of October. So what this means is that the commercial impact here is enormous, because it means that once the trial is completed, it will drive public insurance for the device in Germany. It also means that the trial is a commercial trial for OncoSil. The OncoSil device used in the trial will be covered by the statutory health insurances, and it's an opportunity for participating hospitals to receive reimbursement for patients also not participating in the trial, because that's what the statutory health funds are waiting for. So I'm not going to focus too much on the bottom two boxes. We've already talked about them and what their impact is, and when we hope that these will be on the label and enhance our market position. So what are the upcoming milestones? So we've already talked about the completion of the two studies. The TGA submission has been completed. That is currently undergoing review, so that will give us access to our home market, which is Australia. The label expansion should be in the second half of 2025, as I mentioned, late Q4 of this calendar year. So to have both the percutaneous delivery on the label and the additional chemotherapy, that won't be added until the first half of calendar year 2026. We've also, perhaps by the end of this calendar year, we may see the finalization of the GBA trial. So in the first half of 2026, more likely in the latter part of the first half, there's also the potential for the commencement of the GBA trial in Germany. We intend to launch in Southeast Asian countries in the second half of calendar year 2026, and we are anticipating that we are likely to see an FDA approval for distal cholangiocarcinoma in the second half of 2026. The leadership team at OncoSil is quite extensive, as I mentioned earlier on, from our chairman, Douglas Cubbin, who's got 30 plus years in biopharmaceutical experience in senior roles. In fact, he was the CFO at Telix during their formative years, where they raised quite a lot of capital to get moving. Dr. Thomas Duthie is a welcome addition to our board just recently. And Tom, as many of you may know, has more than 20 years experience across financial markets, corporate development, and board roles. Lal Smith is our non-executive director, and she's an award-winning entrepreneur and investor relations advisor. Shelley Stein is a recent appointment as chief financial officer, and she's had extensive experience in senior accounting, commercial and financial analysis and audit roles across listed as well as private companies. Dr. John Bell. In fact, I should mention it's Professor John Bell now, and he's got 12 plus years experience as a consultant interventional radiologist and is internationally recognized as an expert in the field of interventional radiology. So that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Nigel. I can see we have 5 questions in the chat box. Okay, question number 1. Okay, this actually relates to Amplia Therapeutics. Dev, how does the result of Amplia Therapeutics accent trial impact? Will there be synergy between Amplia and OncoSil by combining them? Nigel, are you across Amplia?
I have followed what Amplia are doing, and yeah, that the result in metastatic patients is quite encouraging. Could there be value in combining the therapies? Obviously, that is an interesting question. It's something that perhaps is worth exploring in the future. We have a lot on our plate at the moment, as do Amplia. And I think it's certainly worth having discussions to see where this may lead.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nigel. Okay, I'll pivot to a question submitted prior. OncoSil continues to provide guidance that it will hit cash flow break-even status by 2H CY26. How much of this expected transition is costs out related, and how much is linked to increased dosage sales?
Well, cost out is about 20%. So we intend to reduce our OPEX by 20% across the board. We're very flat as an organization. There have been some redundancies in the company just recently post the capital raise. And the second half of calendar year 2026, we expect revenue to ramp significantly. And so I think, between the cost out and the latter half of calendar year 2026 will take us to our intended target of cash flow break even by the end of next year.
Thanks, Nigel. Number 2, the geographic footprint diagram is still only European and Middle East focused. When is OncoSil going to penetrate the lucrative US market? And what about Australia?
Well, I've addressed both of those actually in the presentation. So, our discussions currently with US FDA on the HDE are positive, and I think they're constructive as well. I can't say too much more about what we're doing there, but suffice to say that that is still a very big target for us. We're hoping that we get that approval by the second half of calendar year 2026. And that's a target that everybody is working toward in terms of supplying new data that has been analyzed to the agency for them to review. Australia, where we have submitted the file, and it could be by the end of this year that we see an approval.
Thank you. Now, Justin has asked, can you dose patients in Germany under the GBA before the tender has completed? If so, in which month of 2025 do you expect to dose your first patient under the GBA?
Well, in fact, dosing patients or treating patients is not directly linked to the GBA trial. There are hospitals that can start to treat imminently now because they have negotiated for treatments with the statutory health funds. So we're just eagerly awaiting for the startup of German hospitals, which we expect to happen after the summer. We're in the summer months now in Europe, which are generally quiet. So it's not linked. However, when the GBA trial does start, Suffice it to say that all of those participating hospitals that recruit patients and are treated with the OncoSil device, all of those patients will be paid for at the full ASB of 23,000 euros, or 24,000 US dollars.
Thank you,
I hope
Nigel.
that adequately answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Patrick has asked how many cases per centre and how many in total would the Germany trial require?
Well, that trial hasn't been designed yet, so that's the responsibility of the CRO. And as I mentioned, they're now into the second round, where the CRO will submit a possible trial design and a protocol synopsis. And that likely is due by about the middle of October. Now, I mean, the trial could be anywhere from 200 to 250 patients, right? So if it's 200 patients, then because it would be a randomized controlled trial, phase 3, 50% of the patients would be treated with the OncoSil device.
Thank you so much. Okay, Pablo, what is the current investment in market development and sales, brackets dollars and staff worldwide, and when do you expect sales to take a steep increase, i.e. $5 million, $10 million?
We expect sales to take a steep increase in the latter half of calendar year 2026. That will be driven largely by the start of the GBA trial, because Germany is a very big market. Italy is just now coming on stream. In fact, I've signed the first commercial agreement in the region of Lazio for one of the hospitals in that area, and we expect other hospitals to come on stream as well. So, in fact, I did mention that it's a capital light structure. We don't need many salespeople. So, for the foreseeable future, and I think up until at least the end of 2026, it's unlikely that we will be adding other bodies unless we see a significant step up in sales in Germany. That would be the logical market in which we would expand the sales force.
Fantastic. What about China? Have you considered partnering for China, and is this a realistic option?
I think, as I said, we've got a lot on our plate. We are considering it, absolutely. I think it's an important market, but it's not something that we have the bandwidth to tackle ourselves. And it would mean having to partner with a local company, perhaps, to be able to take that on. And there are also questions about how this would be regulated, whether it would be regulated as a medical device, as it is in the rest of the world, or whether it would be regulated as a radiopharmaceutical, which it may be in China, in fact.
Thank you, Nigel. A question about where the proceeds of the A question about where the proceeds of the recent capital raise will be directed. How much of this new equity will go towards your sales and marketing function? And will some go towards your Sydney-based manufacturing facility?
Indeed, very good question. We are working very hard to get the Sydney manufacturing facility up and running, and certainly, a reasonable percentage of the recent capital raise will go into ensuring that that facility is complete and that we can start producing doses out of that facility. And in terms of market penetration, probably about 30% of the funds that we have raised will be focused in the area of market penetration, market access, if you will, as we look at new markets and continue to develop existing markets.
Thanks, Nigel. Have there been any further discussions that you can share with any partnership or joint venture partner for OncoSil?
No, I can't share any of that. Any of those discussions always need to remain confidential because of the agreements between the parties.
Okay, thank you. Okay. OncoSil's initial target addressable market from a disease angle is specific pancreatic cancers. When will the company start applying its platform to other cancer indications like bile duct cancer? Will such a broadening of focus come with a material bounce in R&D capex?
Well, bile duct cancer is actually what we're applying for under the HDE in the United States. So that is our market entry point. So we are exploring bile duct cancer, but we're exploring bile duct cancer where we have tumors that are mass forming on the head of the pancreas. So much the way they present, much the way locally advanced, unresectable, locally advanced pancreatic tumors present. So there's almost indistinguishable. So it is a market that, an area, a disease area that we are certainly targeting in the US for our initial entry.
Thank you so much, Nigel. A question from Justin. Are you expecting any broker or analyst research to come out soon?
That is certainly under discussion. We're hoping that that's going to happen. There have been discussions, so I'm looking forward to those reports coming out myself, but I think we should see some analyst reports in the very near future.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your questions today. Thank you, Nigel, for the presentation. A recording of this presentation has been recorded and will be shared in due course. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to email me at julia@thecapitalnetwork.com.au. Thank you for your time today.